Everyone for joining. We'll let that start. Yeah, perfect. So, welcome to Decoding Stress, the mind-body connection and symptoms. I am Dr. Sarah Dimunno. I am a naturopathic doctor. I practice in Ontario, and my practice right now is almost completely virtual. I do have a virtual clinic, and I strive to help women solve their period cramps, boost energy, and PMS in 3 cycles. So yeah, I also have a young son named Jack who's 2 years old. So I am still consider myself to be a new mom and figuring out what a working mom looks like. So I'm very much a real human as well, trying to navigate the world with you guys.
Amazing. And I'm Krista. I'm a registered psychotherapist and holistic nutritionist. The holistic nutritionist has really just been in the last year or so. My main focus is on women kind of supporting around all things self-esteem, relationships, mainly relationship to self. So how to build a relationship with ourselves, what that looks like, what that feels like, and really kind of understanding how that impacts every other area in our life, how we show up at work, in relationships with other people, as well as a really strong focus in understanding our body. So why our body is doing what it's doing, learning how to listen to our body, what's our nervous system saying, which is why we're here tonight, and just being able to build a relationship with ourselves that has this beautiful foundation around compassion and being able to listen and providing our needs. Yeah, all fun things.
Yeah, I think when we had connected, Chris and I had connected a while back and just had like a similar philosophy with our patients, but definitely also seeing a pattern. I think we both have had our individual journeys in terms of healing as well, but just seeing that pattern in our patients, that stress is kind of undermining them feeling like their best selves, and knowing that fostering the body-mind connection could help them lead to better health. I think for the purposes of this talk, we kind of separated the topics into kind of mind, body. And so Krista's going to focus a little bit more on the mind, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on the body aspect of things. But know that like they are intertwined, and we both are educated in both and think both way equally as important.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So next.
Okay, so in a classic recording or a webinar with practitioners that love focusing on the body, we are just going to do a brief little, scan of the body, kind of even some tools that you can use at home to even off the top understand what regulating your nervous system is like, and just being able to embody and feel what calming your system down is like. So, of course, I can't see anyone, that's totally fine, but in your own space, if you can, just kind of sitting back in your chair for a second, getting comfortable. And we are going to do what's called a physiological sigh. So this is taking a deep breath in through the nose, holding at the top, and then when you release, just sighing it out. Do 2 or 3 of those. I find even like really hearing that sigh sound, activating those senses, hearing it is that nice little added touch, which is why the sigh is so important. When you've done a couple of those, I like to do what's also called like horsey breath. So you're blowing air out through your lips. So the same process of breathing in, hold at the top. I don't know if you can even see when I'm doing that, like my shoulders needed to lower. So it's a beautiful recognition of, okay, I was actually really tense there, and blowing the air out in that different way. Signal to the body, hey, we're safe, we're okay right now. I can sit back and relax a little bit more. Try a couple of those. There are so many different ways to practice breath work, to incorporate breathing into our daily practice, whether it's, I'm sure many people have heard of the box breathing, like breathing in for 4, holding for 4. That's a really good one. Breathing through different nostrils, but I really like those two. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on those because I actually want to do one more thing together. And of course, exactly where you are, hopefully you're sitting somewhere comfy. This is utilizing a little bit more of our body to notice and to ground ourselves into the present moment that you are in. So in your chair, get yourself as comfortable as you can. And all I want you to do is feel your body being held by the chair, the couch, the bed that you're on. You're just going to bring that attention. You're going to notice, okay, my feet are on the floor. The back of my legs are being held by the chair. I can feel my back on the back of the chair, or maybe your head's resting, and just notice. The only thing I have to do right now is my body's being held on this chair. At the same time that you're noticing your body being held, can you just notice your breath at the same time? You're not going to change your breath. You're not trying to figure out, is it going too fast? Is it going too slow? Just at the same time as noticing your body being held, notice air come in, notice air come out. See if you can notice both of those at the same time. If you can't, that's absolutely okay. We'll talk more about that. That's the nervous system even indicating it's hard to do too many things at once, or it feels dysregulated, even focusing on the body sometimes. Do what you can, do what feels comfortable. Body's being held, breath's coming in and out. And then we're going to add a third layer at the same time. If your eyes were closed, you're going to open them and just look around your room. What can you see? What colors can you pick out? Can you notice any textures? There might be little specks of dirt or dust. Can you look out a window and see any colors? Anything that kind of draws your attention. At the same time, noticing breath coming in and out, your body being held by the chair. You cannot do this wrong. Okay, this isn't about, oh my goodness, this is so hard. This is so complicated. Why can't I do this right? We're just noticing our body. Can you bring curiosity to what does it feel like to even focus on all of these different things? Taking a couple more seconds. Notice if there's any sensations that come up. Maybe there's buzz or a calming, or maybe there's a heat, or maybe your body actually says, oh, I'm really uncomfortable in this position. I want to move. Honor that. Listen to that. You can't do this wrong. Take another deep breath. Shake it off. And we will continue on.
I feel like I really needed that. I feel like I can hear a change in my voice now. That was awesome. Thank you, Krista, for leading us through that.
Amazing.
I feel like my feet are even like heavier on the ground. I love it. It's so good.
And that's just orienting, just noticing, right? My body's here. It's so easy for us to just be all over the place, focusing on all of these different things, and bringing our body back to the present moment is super powerful.
Yeah, and I think so our next slide here is just understanding early cues of like a dysregulated system. And so doing something like that can be really helpful to understand what those symptoms might be in yourself. I think if we're not taking that time to reflect, and we're going to give you some things to look out for right now. You may not actually even notice those things. So that's a really good tool to have.
Yeah, the emotional piece I think is even really pretty straightforward usually in understanding the initial cues from our body, but even just to briefly go through it, like it might be, oh, a nice spelling mistake there. Urge to distract or avoid is usually a big one, like feeling that I need to go do something quickly, or I need to distract, or maybe we're feeling more irritable than we usually are, or there's an anger kind of yeah, you can feel it bubbling, which can often even lead to that. I need to distract and avoid right away. Those can be some early cues from your body, kind of like just knocking from the inside out, like, hey, I need you to pay attention. There's something going on in here.
When you say distract, I think of how like in those moments, what that looks like for me is just pulling my phone out and trying to scroll and scrolling and scrolling and just needing that time for my brain to stop. I can
Yeah.
totally see that as an example.
Mine is I somehow end up on Amazon and I'm like, I think I should buy this. I should buy this. And I think we need this now. It's a cue for me now that I know, okay, I
Mm.
actually haven't been paying attention to something.
Yes, yes, exactly. Same here. I was going to talk a little bit more about the physical symptoms. So, one thing that'll have you take note is that how widespread across the body these symptoms actually list. So, we're going
Mhm.
from hair loss to fatigue to digestive symptoms like bloating and nausea, reflux, tension headaches, like weight management, foggy thinking. Some of these don't happen right away. I know we were talking a little bit more about earlier cues. I would say typically when things start to go off, I would say definitely like that fatigue exhaustion happens. And also
Mhm.
so classic for my patients would be that waking between 2 to 4 a.m. Waking, especially with like a racing mind, just like thinking, it's such a classic time when we know that something is really stressing your body out.
I wake up with jaw tension. I
Good
know
job.
that I've been like clenching, grinding is a real early cue for me as well. My body's holding on to stress after that
Yeah.
2 a.m. wake up.
And then that's too like where a lot of people get the tension headaches or they wake up with a headache and
Mhm.
it's just like the whole body, like you were saying when we did the exercise with you, it's like your if your shoulders are up like this, like no wonder why some people also get some tension headaches because the muscles are just contracted, ready to like run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then next is kind of the things that happen when our body is saying no for you. So after a certain point, your body's like, I don't want to push through anymore, which is our tendency. We push through, we just like disconnect from our bodies. We are like we're ignoring the sleep issue, we're ignoring like our food not really digesting properly, and we just keep going because we want to keep maybe performing, we want to do well at work, we want to put those extra hours in, so we just like ignore this. And
Mhm.
then we end up with bigger issues.
Yeah, really, I just honing in on this, like when the body says no for you, right? And there's this whole bit of information out there on the body keeps the score. I don't know if anyone's read that book or if you've read that book, and it's very much more from a trauma perspective, but understanding that our body is paying attention to everything we are doing all the time. Our body is incorporated in everything we are doing all the time. And we can talk more about that later because that isn't always something that we're aware of, that every bit of our body is often trying to communicate and is listening to what we're saying and doing. And when we're even saying to ourselves, like, no, I don't need to pay attention to that, the body often is like, oh, I'm going to clock that, remember that for later. And then when that builds up over a long period of time, the body at some point often says, and I'm done now.
Yeah. And I actually, like you made a good point around just like that collective memory and how sometimes it actually isn't, it doesn't have to be like a really big thing to like make it snap into a point where you can't return. Like when I take history with my patients, sometimes it'll be like, yeah, I wasn't feeling well and then I got a cold and then I just haven't been able to recover.
Yeah.
So that was like the thing that pushed them over the edge. Sometimes it is a big thing, like a personal loss or something like that. But if your body's already kind of struggling, it can just be like a really small whiff, and then you're over the edge of this dysregulated system.
Yeah.
One, I was going to give an example like of a patient, or if like I actually have seen this a few times where we come up with this new diagnosis called idiopathic urticaria, which basically means
Oh.
hives. And the medical system hasn't actually been able to really give a reason. So that's what the idiopathic is. There's not really a reason for it. But when you do the history and you look back, you're like, they had fatigue, they had allergies, they
Mhm.
had emotional stress, their hair was falling out, and they were just not
Digestion
doing.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the body goes, whoop, and that's too much. And then they end up with hives. This is just like one example,
Mhm.
but that is what happens when the body says no. And once the hives come, you're like, okay, I actually have to deal with this. But how loud does the body actually have to get also for you to actually do something about it?
Absolutely. So relatable. I see often anxiety, right? Like a chronic anxiety, a chronic stress, and then leading to like digestion challenges, right? I know even in my own experiences, every single time there's even a slight little bit of dysregulation in my nervous system, my emotional world, my digestion system goes off, right? And then the longer that continues, it leads to leaky gut and SIBO and all of those type of things.
Like more
Yeah.
chronic
Yeah.
issues. Yeah. So I think what is a really good idea for us is to actually understand what stressors are. I'm going to pull that slide up in a second, but I just wanted to talk about how that conversation can sometimes go with patients when I just point blank ask them, are you stressed? Because a lot of them, you may have attended this because you're recognizing stress in your life, but I would say like most of them are like, I'm not really stressed. I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
like everyone's stressed though, right? So like I'm not more stressed than the other person. So they totally minimize their stress and they're not actually able to kind of understand what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, so this, I'm going to pull up the slide now, but give you some examples of what stressors could look like in your life.
Yeah, even just to bounce off that for a second, Sarah, I will often ask the same as well and get the same. I don't really think I'm that stressed. And I'll say, I don't mean your to-do list, right? Like we think that stress is just, I have so much to do this week. I have to get all of this done. This horrible thing happened, right? And I need to figure that out. Stress can be, I mean, and this list is huge and massive and probably can feel overwhelming. So take it little bits at a time. But stress can be a whole variable of things. It doesn't just have to be, oh, yeah, I've had a chaotic week at work. So I'm not
Mhm.
stressed or I am stressed.
Yeah, actually, on that note, I'm just gonna ask our audience if they want to just like a really quick, like, how many of you think that stress it has to be bad? So just like a true or false, if you can pop in a T or an F for false, but how many of you like true or false is stress bad? I'm just curious what our audience is thinking. True. Okay. Yep, we got one true. False. Okay. Okay, some mixed answers here.
Hmm.
I guess it really, really depends on what the stressor is, but I would say stress is not necessarily bad. So maybe a bit of an annoying answer, but the reason why I brought it up in the way that you were talking about it is that sometimes I'll have patients say it's not, they're not stressed, but they actually kind of almost on the opposite, like, but they're working 12 hours a day, but they love their job. So it's not stress.
Yeah, going to the gym is a stressor, but isn't bad stress, right?
Isn't bad
Depending
stress. It's a
on when you're
stressor.
doing it, how often you're going, what your nervous system's like. Absolutely.
Exactly. So I think sometimes if we have these things that are really good, but we're not actually taking the time to handle or like Kelly was saying, or reboot, then that can add up to be stressors too. So it's a
Mhm.
physical demand that you're putting on your body and how much you're actually expecting out of that can act as a stress as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to point out with this slide is that for those of you who have been pregnant or hopeful to be pregnant, pregnancy and postpartum is on this list. So I like to remind people this because again, that's another time where maybe this is really exciting, like you're having a baby, you had a baby, but that's actually a really difficult process for your body to go through. That's an example of a really big
Mhm.
physical stress or physical change that your body is going through and having to withstand. And the reason why I bring that up, whatever phase in childbearing years you may be, is that when I talk to patients who are perimenopause, menopause, it was like one kid after another. That was like the accumulation of when they really, really started to feel not themselves. And I not taking that time to physically recoup after having children as well. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of point out from this list as a physical stressor. But there's food sensitivities on this list. That's a physical stressor. Um, surgeries, that's a physical stressor. So I think we're a lot better at maybe identifying emotional stressors than we are physical ones because we're just so
Yeah.
used to those
Yeah,
out.
but I think even along the lines of that, like we view some of these emotional stressors as a bad thing sometimes, like fear, worry, anxiety, and they don't have to be a bad thing. It's just an emotion, right? And when we can attach that understanding and that knowing that I am just experiencing fear right now, can I get curious? Can I understand my body better? Then it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. So did you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, this is just more like a visual and something to kind of take home for yourself in what is in your stress bucket. If we are all carrying this bucket all the time and we can kind of flip back and forth to the other screen if you want. Like if we check off 20 of those, right? 30 of those and realize, wow, okay, my bucket is overfilling with stressors. And of course, my body's going to be reacting in the ways that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Slide there. A key thing that I want to point out is, can we take inventory of what's in the bucket without judging it, right? Because when we're labeling all of these things, or we're recognizing I have endless amounts of stress, if we are viewing it from a negative place or shaming ourselves for it or judging, and we're actually adding another stress to it, right? So encouraging you that if we were to kind of examine this, it's, can I come at it from a place of curiosity and just noticing, what does it feel like to even see all of those stressors?
Yeah. And I like how this visual too has like there's a hole in your bucket. So it's a leaky bucket. Like in this visual, it's a leaky bucket. So as much as you may need to kind of fill your bucket up, like things drain out. So those stressors are things that like can also poke holes in that bucket and cause you to leach and drain. So even if sometimes you're taking supplements or you're eating well, like if you're not actually patching those holes up, then you're also may have a harder time to heal.
Yeah, leading to that feeling that I think we all know so well, is just like depleted, exhausted. And I think it's easy for us to, again, kind of go back to this. Well, my to-do list isn't that crazy. Why? I slept great last night. Like I shouldn't be this tired. And sometimes it's more indicative of, is that bucket just seeping out energy from these stressors?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so understanding the nervous system. It's a little bit, we're going to try to bring it all together. It's a little bit complicated. This is a little bit more of the like dense part of it. So I'm hoping to make it as clear as I can for you guys. Of course, everybody I'm sure has heard of the nervous system, right? Our automatic nervous system. But I really like this picture to the left here. I know it's probably hard to see it clearly on this. When we send you guys some documents and stuff afterwards, you can probably see it better. But it just really shows that in our parasympathetic nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system, that it is hitting different organs. And pretty much most of them are listed there. But it's just to have this knowing that our nervous system and how it's impacted is going to be hitting the lungs at this point, or the liver at this point, or our digestion system. So the automatic nervous system is going to automatically regulate many important functions, okay? To make it a little bit more complicated, it's divided into two branches, and most people know of these branches. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response, and we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, okay? So the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, starts kind of at like the base of your brain, in the spinal cord there. And it helps regulate blood flow, our heart rate, breath. And yeah, in a healthy functioning sympathetic nervous system, this is going to lead to like a really nice body temperature. We can also use this to energize ourselves, to mobilize ourselves. We need our sympathetic nervous system to, like I said, get to the gym or attend a really high active event. When this isn't in a healthy state, this is where we're getting into more of that fight or flight. Okay. We are meant to cycle in and out of these states as we go through the day. And I'll explain a little bit more of that later. But when we are under stress, and I know, Sarah, you're going to talk about this coming up, we have what's called the HPA axis, which is our, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, our hypothalamus, right? Our pituitary gland and our adrenal glands.
Mm-hmm.
The HPA axis, kind of a simple way to think of it is like, this is our superhero. These are our assistants, right? Like we want this HPA axis to kind of kick in and activate things so that we can calmly move the body back into a parasympathetic state, okay? So when a stressor is acute, so short term, the sympathetic nervous system will activate, it will hopefully turn off, our hormones will regulate again, and our body can relax, okay? When this becomes more chronic or there's trauma, then this response stays active and we can get stuck in it, okay? Make sense so far? Sympathetic nervous system. On the other side, we have our parasympathetic nervous system, and most people know of this as the rest and digest, and we think that that means that we are in our calm, relaxed state, okay? Sorry, I'm going to backtrack. The vagus nerve is also connected to our parasympathetic state. And our vagus nerve is, again, also connected from like the back little brain stem there and wanders. It's called the wandering nerve. It goes throughout our entire body, kind of creeping out and touching all of our organs. We call it an information highway because it kind of serves as the main connection or communication between the brain and the body. Now, the added piece that people often aren't quite aware of is the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve, has two separate divided parts. We have what's called the dorsal vagal and the ventral vagal, okay? In the picture to the right there on the ladder, you can kind of, I put it as a ladder because you can see like at the top, we have ventral, and this is what's connected to our heart and our lungs and our throat. So this is why a lot of people recommend singing, humming, gargling water, nose breathing, because you are stimulating that ventral vagal system, which calms your nervous system, okay? The ventral vagals also, our social engagement, when we are really connected to people, when we have good eye contact, when we feel great in relationships with people, it keeps us regulated. A mother-child relationship is a great example of being in a ventral vagal state. It's just this like direct eye contact, heart to heart, like feeling very connected, okay? So for most of us, we feel really good when we're in our ventral vagal parasympathetic state, yeah? Dorsal vagal, the one at the bottom, is from the diaphragm down, which connects to our stomach, our liver, and just all the digestive organs. Okay, so it's of course responsible for our digestion system. In a survival response, the dorsal vagal, okay, is going to be moving the body into that hypoarousal, meaning we're going to have a little bit more of a slowed heart rate. Our breathing's impacted, our digestion feels really sluggish. This is more of a numbing, freezing, disconnected, kind of foggy state that we're in, okay? The dorsal vagal state usually happens when we're getting stuck in our parasympathetic state, and usually happens when we've been in chronic stress for a really long time. So in a healthy, regulated state, and I'm going to even kind of preface here, regulated doesn't mean we're calm all the time. It means that we have the ability to go up into a stressful state, got a really nasty email I didn't like, fight or flight, did what I needed to do to come back down, entered into that ventral vagal state. Okay, then maybe I went out for lunch with friends, went back into that ventral vagal, but then got a really bad text message later, or my boss called and entered into that fight or flight. If we've been in chronic stress for a really long time, or we get stuck in a fight or flight, it's easy for us to drop down into that dorsal, stuck, kind of frozen, very lethargic, I can't do anything state. Okay. Yeah, are we following? Does that make sense? It's a ton of information. Yeah.
Looks good. Yeah. The dorsal vagal, I wonder how honestly how many people are stuck in that without realizing. And just that like numb, frozen, like can't move. Can't run away.
Yeah, and I think to some degree we almost like, yeah, we've gotten used to existing in what we call functional freeze, where our body is in this frozen state and a very depleted state, but we keep pushing through. A really great way I like to describe the dorsal vagal is thinking of an iPhone battery on 20%. You have an iPhone, when it goes to 20, it kind of gives you that little notice like, hey, you're running out of battery. So we're going to slow the phone down. We're going to shut down some of the systems that are running in the back. We're going to try to preserve energy. And that's kind of the dorsal vagal state that you're in. Your body is saying, I'm still doing what I need to do, but not at full capacity, not at my best. I need to be preserving energy and slowing the system down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting. And then there's also the hormonal side of things as well. So, cortisol in the circadian rhythm. I think going back to thinking about when we will dismiss stress, like I think there's this lack of understanding that there's actually like these physical responses happening to like emotional and physical stressors. So when we talk about the cortisol response, like this response is meant to keep us alive. It's meant to help us manage with these stressors that come up. It's just not meant to be like continuously triggered. So for what happens in your body, so this is like a hormone. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And there, if you look to the left of the screen, there is an example of how this actually works in our body. So Krista kind of touched on this a little bit, the HPA axis. So it's basically like a communication highway that tells the rest of your body what to do. But you'll see here, there's on the left side, there's a stress. So this stress again can be getting into a fight with your partner, or sorry, like you said, getting a nasty text message, and that will trigger the stress response. So the hypothalamus will identify that perceive that there has been some sort of physical or psychological trigger and stressor. It tells the anterior pituitary to then release this hormone called ACTH. Essentially, that is another communicating hormone that tells the the adrenal gland what to do. So the adrenal glands, they actually sit on the top of your kidneys like little hats. So your kidneys are basically at the back of your like low back. And at the top of these little triangular hats on the kidneys, that's your adrenal gland. And your adrenal gland will produce cortisol. So again, we have this stressor, your adrenal gland has now been told we need to release cortisol into the bloodstream. That now has major effects to the rest of the body. One of the main things that that message the body receives is that we actually need to dump sugar into the bloodstream because we need to get away from here quick. We need energy quick. We need to get moving. So I like to remind people of this again when maybe weight loss issues come up in the future, because even if you're not eating sugar or even like blood sugar issues, is that if you're under chronic stress, your body's getting a signal to release stored glucose all the time. So that can be a cortisol issue. Anti-inflammatory properties. It temporarily can improve like memory and motivation over time. I think one of the things I see the most in my patients is, or one of the phrases I hear is like, I just don't have the motivation to do anything. And this is going to be like a further, more chronic response. But that feeling of I'm tired, but I also like motivation. When I hear that word motivation, I'm always thinking back to cortisol, because that really provides that motivation to do those simple tasks, to get you out of bed, to like get you off the couch, to like go get food or something. So this is something that if it happens over and over and over, it can really cause damage. Um, it's a true hormone cascade. Now there's the other side though, the other side of cortisol, which is connected to our circadian rhythm. And and that's why I kind of had asked that question earlier too, is like cortisol always bad? It's not, because it actually helps us get out of the morning. It's part of our sleep-wake cycle. It's released on this 24-hour cycle that drives our biological clock, that actually influences a lot of the other hormones in terms of the timing and when to actually be released. So there are these light centers in our brains that pick up on light and darkness. So in the morning when it's light out, we wake up, cortisol is released. 2 hours after waking, we get a bit more of a boost as well after we've gotten our first meal. And then it starts to decline, but we have kind of that afternoon time where it should be a significant point for cortisol, and then it should actually peter off for the rest of the day when it becomes night, so that melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, can release and you can sleep at nighttime. And this kind of goes every 24 hours. And that's where, again, light and darkness really plays into regulating the circadian rhythm. One area that's really obvious for people, anyone that's shift workers, they really struggle with this because they may not be actually going to sleep when it's dark out. So that's really confusing for their brains to sort of continue. And it can actually lead to this like flip-flop of their circadian rhythm, which also can feel pretty badly as well. So you do have to marry both of these together. The goal isn't necessarily to have no cortisol either, because we also want cortisol to be there to get us out of bed and give us energy. But we also don't want cortisol to be like constantly be released, because that actually just breaks us down and brings us back to that leaky bucket. So you can see we've chatted about how there's different areas that this cortisol can touch. When we went back, if I go back to the slide in the beginning, understanding the early cues, we talked about hair loss and digestive issues and all of this. So this controls our hunger cues and our sex hormones. So it is so foundational, and that actually brings me to the next slide. So again, I have patients come into my office, or virtually, I should say, I almost never get like, oh, I'm really, again, really stressed, or this is the reason why I'm here. What I get is I think I have a hormone imbalance. I think my hormones are imbalanced, and what they almost always refer to is their sex hormones, which are the estrogens and progesterone and testosterone. Or you might get, especially if there's weight management issues or maybe some cold intolerance, like I think I have a thyroid problem. The interesting thing is that thyroid and cortisol do actually sound pretty similar symptomatically. It's not until oftentimes you're doing the lab test to really rule in or out each one, but you cannot fix the thyroid issues. You cannot fix the sex hormone issues without working on that cortisol, which is super, super foundational. If there's something wrong with cortisol, like you bet your sex hormones are taking a hit. Cortisol will pull on progesterone, it'll make irregular cycles, heavy cycles, like there's so much that it pulls on. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because I put this on the same plane as cortisol, is insulin. And some of you may or may not have heard of insulin. Insulin is another hormone that helps us regulate our blood sugar levels. So that does come into play when regulating cortisol as well, because of that blood sugar release with the cortisol hormone. If we have too much, that can also throw cortisol off as well. Did you have anything else to add to the hormone
Oh
area?
no, you're getting it all. I think it's just really important to I guess merge them together, right? The more we can attune to our body and know what state we are in, and even just utilizing that ladder, right? Like learning, okay, my heart rate has increased right now. Am I entering into that sympathetic state, or am I feeling really lethargic right now? Am I feeling unmotivated, and being able to kind of tune into your body? And have I been living off of cortisol for the past 12 hours? And what do I need to do to regulate that so that, we can kind of keep on top of all of these other important factors?
Yeah. So I think maybe pausing here, if everyone can kind of think back to the talk today, and just having that reflection, if you do resonate with some of these things, maybe just going back to the symptoms, like do you resonate on having some of these symptoms? Like, are you anxious? Are you feeling irritable? I think that's actually a really common one, is when I'm trying to differentiate between the hormones that might be at play. Like irritability comes through high with the cortisol issues for sure.
Yeah.
Like other people are really dumb when you have cortisol issues. Or that's how it feels anyways.
Yeah.
But or like, have you been struggling with hair loss and like not really been able to understand where it's coming from? Have you been feeling fatigued? So some of these things may indicate that, okay, you do have a cortisol issue or a nervous system issue, stress that we can maybe help. So that's our next goal, is to kind of give you some of those supports. If you have recognized these things in yourself now, like what can you do at home right now about it?
Yeah, I was just, even as you're speaking, it reminded me of how many times I've also been told from practitioners, like, it's stress and you're stressed this way, and it's stress that's causing this. And I'm like, great, that's stressing me out, right? Like it can be
Mm,
this vicious cycle. And depending on how we view stress in our life, kind of coming back to that, is it bad? Is it good? And even learning how to kind of detach from the meaning of stress and not taking on more stress by trying to figure out how stressed out we are, right?
mhm,
So some emotional mental supports. There's a small list here. It really is endless. I think a really important one, though, right off the top there, is boundaries and practicing saying no. And coming from this place of, say, we know that we are in that dorsal vagal, so we are in that frozen, freeze, lethargic state. Our body is saying very clearly, I am needing to shut down. So when someone says, hey, let's go out and grab a drink later, if we don't have that awareness that our body is really actually not functioning well and is exhausted, we feel that urge to, well, I can't say no, I have to go out, right? So having boundaries, having the ability to say, I am actually not in a position to do that, or I'm so sorry, but I'll catch you another time, can be so important to take care of ourselves and offer that compassion internally. A really big one, kind of mixed in with attuning to your body. Somatics is being able to be in our body and move things out, move emotions out of our body. But noticing what nervous system state you are in is really foundational. So kind of coming back to that ladder, being able to read your body, being curious, bringing a curiosity towards yourself. What was my day like today? What are some of the stressors that I know I was coming into contact with? And am I feeling really depleted? Have I been kind of having the life sucked out of me today? Can I bring that curiosity towards asking, what do I need? What do I need in this moment? What do I need now that maybe I didn't need an hour ago, but I do now? And can I provide that for myself? I have glimmers on here as well. Glimmers are the opposite of triggers. Everybody knows what a trigger is. It's that thing that activates that fight or flight, that nervous system, or a trauma reaction. But a glimmer is actually the opposite. It is tiny little things in our day that feel really good. And I think there's a learning curve to glimmers. It can be hard to kind of go out of our way to find things that make us feel good when things are really hard and stressful. But a glimmer could be, my latte this morning was really good. And can I just take a second to really sit with how delicious that latte was? Or maybe you're out for a walk and you see a super cute puppy, and that little like jolt of, oh, I love that dog. That can be a glimmer. Or you get a nice text message from someone, but it's giving yourself the opportunity to notice glimmers and to seek them out. So if that means, yeah, moving your body, any sort of breath work, meditations, you can find glimmers in all of those things as well. So those are some things to work with. Yeah, most people I think have some sort of idea of, going for a walk or checking in with a friend, but really embodying some of these things and making them your own for yourself, from yourself. I see here somatic. So Kelly, somatics is like soma means to be in the body. So somatics will be noticing that I'm angry right now and being able to tune into how can I release just that anger. So a somatic approach to handling anger would be knowing that anger feels really tight and maybe like explosive. So it is expressing that emotion from a physical component. So punching a pillow, jumping up and down, growling like an animal. You're kind of moving an emotion through on your with your body.
I'd say with the mental emotional supports, I guess it really depends on the person. Like for me, a lot of patients are coming in really focused on the physical body, but like kind of struggle with where to start with some of these things. Just the actual practice of saying no or setting boundaries,
Yeah.
using your voice like for something that you need. I think and sometimes you want to start with the mental emotional and sometimes you want to start with physical or both. Sometimes I feel like once we are feeling better, like if you are truly just feeling like so lethargic, it is kind of nice to fuel yourself up and then you can feel stronger for that mental emotional changes that you're trying to implement for
Yeah.
the long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just trying to think of like boundary or like using your voice or asking for what you need. Like it can start off if that's kind of feeling scary, like really little too.
Mhm.
Like I remember when I was younger, let's say, I would be scared to even say like what restaurant I wanted to go to. And it's like, why? Like, why would I, so, but some people like that feels scary and just in terms of asking for what they need and practice that with someone that you really love. Be like, you know what, I would really like to go to this restaurant again. I'm just thinking because that was like one thing that stood out to
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
from my
Yeah.
experience back in the day.
Yeah.
But that is something like you can start small and once you get more comfortable with those things, you can build.
Yeah, and I think kind of brings us back to understanding our body again, right? When we can understand why that impacts us, where that's coming from, and we can probably have a whole other session on learning to understand our body and
Yes.
what to do with emotions, for sure.
Before I move on to some of the physical supports, I just saw a question here that I actually wanted to touch on because I think it's actually a really good question. So someone had said that they like to go to bed between 1 and 2, just like because of lifestyle, of events that occur that are later. not necessarily feeling ill effects. It's hard to say because like in that specific example, what that might be impacting you, because I would have to have a conversation to ask you what it might be impacting, but typically most people do best in terms of getting a proper melatonin release, and the deep sleep and recovery is typically between 10 and 11, because around 10 o'clock is when our natural melatonin levels should actually be released, and that's why most people get most of their deep sleep before 12. So if you go to bed late, like 1 or 2, you're actually probably really depleted in like a deep sleep. And that may actually, like, again, affect you in the long term. Also, for men, testosterone is also made overnight. So again, if they're not getting that proper circadian rhythm, they may not actually get the same level of testosterone that they could. So something to kind of be aware of there. Awesome. Okay. So the physical examples. So yeah, like just as there's the circadian rhythm piece, like we can actually influence our cortisol with lifestyle things. So typically eating a really balanced meal, prioritizing protein and healthy fats. So where I find most people go wrong here is that they may skip meals, or they're not having like breakfast, which like having a really protein dense breakfast, so usually about 25 grams of protein before 10 or within 2 hours of waking, actually signals to the body again that you're awake, you're ready for your day, and that you want to continue to be making cortisol to give you energy and for the rest of the day. So sorry, Adobe's trying to make me download something right now. Of course. So yeah, definitely prioritizing those balanced meals, like minimizing sugar and alcohol. I feel like that goes without saying, but those things actually cause stress to the body. Specifically something like sugar, when we are causing a blood sugar spike and then dip, which will just crash with that. That also puts a big hit on cortisol and your hormone insulin, which again, those were the foundational levels. I think this one can become a little controversial. You hear this a lot on like social media, is the no coffee on an empty stomach, or waiting. I do really think like if you can hold off or minimize your coffee intake, like it's just again one less stressor to your body. I think like sometimes coffee can be like a little cup of anxiety. It's just like adding fuel to the fire. And if you're not giving your body a chance to wake up in the morning, have that proper cortisol awakening response, again, that's going to shift things to an abnormal timing, and it may actually make you feel worse, especially if you are replacing a meal with a coffee. And then the coffee also further suppresses your appetite, so you might actually not want to eat anything until like 12. So I would really try to avoid that and play around with it. Like you may actually notice, like that is something that I live by. I don't have coffee on an empty stomach ever. And I never have it after 12 either, because I know that that's going to impact my sleep. But I feel so much better. And I find most people who switch to having food first feel better with that as well. The circadian living. So I mentioned sun exposure and darkness really does signal to our brain what time of day it is. So if you're able to in the morning, even like 5 minutes of sunlight, getting outside just generally in the day without sunglasses, because sunglasses will actually block that sunlight that we need for the special part of our brain that monitors light exposure. And then darkness at night. So like in the cities, there's so much light pollution. So if you're able to get like some blackout blinds or something, trying to make your room as dark as possible. The rule of thumb is really like if you can see your hand in front of you at night, then that's still probably too light. I mean, it's hard to get it like pitch black, but as dark as possible. And then like limiting your screen exposure at night. I think this also has become a really popular topic. Screens before bed, all of those things confuse our brain and what time of day it is. So what you'll see, I mentioned initially, like waking between 2 to 4 a.m., that's such a common one. When
Mhm.
that happens, what's happening is that your cortisol is actually spiking when it should not be spiking. And that can happen because, again, your body's unsure of what time of day. So I think a lot of people make the connection with like having light exposure and initially falling asleep, but they're not seeing or making that connection that light exposure at nighttime actually can also cause them to have that 2 to 4 a.m. awakening, because the body just doesn't know when the circadian rhythm should be really tied to. So using the circadian living as a way to influence the rest of the body. Some of these other ones are kind of more simple as well. Krista kind of touched on exercise before, about that can be a stressor. Where I find it to be a stressor, well, this is why my rule of thumb here, because exercise, like, it is kind of a mixed bag when you hear like people giving recommendations on what to do. But my kind of rule of thumb that I use is just exercise to the point that you're feeling refreshed. If you don't feel refreshed, if you crash after, that's a sign that you're doing too much in some way.
Sometimes
You
it's even just as simple as making sure you're moving, right? Like our bodies love to move. Our nervous system likes to move. It is always moving, right? And just, yeah, sometimes I find even just removing the word exercise and just making it into making
right,
sure you're moving,
movement.
getting movement, moving your blood flow, moving your heart rate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also like making sure you're fueled enough for that. I know I talked
Mhm.
about food, but like if you're intermittent fasting and then you're exercising and then you're working a really long day, like that's too much, often too much for people. And also not sacrificing sleep to exercise as well. Like sleep is just fundamental. So not yeah, sacrificing that for sleep. And then, yeah, drink enough water, those typical things. I like to talk about deep breathing before meals because that can actually help us put us in that parasympathetic state so that your body knows it's time for a meal and that you're not eating on the go, you're chewing your food slowly. All those things are really helpful for that nervous system.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I think that there's so many other things, but these are things we really wanted to focus on that you could start now, like start it at home now.
Yeah, and even just assessing, like if any of these reading these, you're like, that's going to be so stressful for me to even implement, then that's not where you start, right?
Yeah.
Like it is about learning how to merge all of this information together, learning how to even ask yourself, okay, have I gotten movement today? And is that going to be restorative? Or even coming back to the nervous system, if we're in that dorsal vagal state, right, we might need a tiny little bit of a boost to kind of activate ourselves again, right? Or if we're in a sympathetic state, going and doing a HIIT workout, you're already flying up that ladder, right? So it's coming back to the body. What kind of movement can I do? What type of meals are going to be nourishing for me to bring it all together?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, like you said, it's a strategy. So
Yeah.
take your time with it.
Okay, that's pretty much it. I do want to respect people's time. It is one
Mhm.
after eight. So if people, we wanted to keep it to an hour. So people do need to hop off, but I was going to do just one more little brief body-based, bringing ourselves back to the present moment. This is a lot of information. And even if it's great information, it can be overwhelming. It can be really stimulating for us. So even just yeah, giving yourself a few minutes to shake that off and bring yourself back will hopefully be really restorative. So, same as last time, get yourself into a comfy position. Take a couple deep breaths. You can try the ones that we did last time, the physiological sigh. We did the horsey breath. Another one that I can add on is to activate the vagus nerve, that nerve we were talking about that wanders through the body. It really likes vibration. So it likes humming, singing, gargling water. So taking a deep breath in and then vooing on the way out, kind of like a low rumble in your throat. Ooh. See what you notice in your body. See if that felt nice, if that felt weird. If you don't want to voo, you can even just kind of hum. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of move through this a little bit quicker than I usually would. We're going to do a little bit more of a body-based tool this time. So this is kind of activating our fascia. And our fascia is like this webbing in between our tissue, our muscles and bones. But it's a really important piece of our body to kind of regulate and comfort and soothe the body. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your arm and you're going to just rub your hand along it. And when you're moving your hand up, you're going to breathe in. And then on the other side, moving down, you're going to breathe out. Just bring attention to the body. What does it feel like to have your hands on your arms? Noticing your breath at the same time. Switch to the other arm. Usually I would do this a lot slower, but I'm just going to kind of teach you the method, but take as long as you want. We can't see you. You can just get comfy. Going to go to your stomach. Do a little bit of a rub. I usually find people are kind of a little uncomfortable with this one at first. There's can be a lot of association with our belly and how we feel about our body. So do what's comfortable. Maybe give it a little tap, a little rub. Hello, belly. I see you. I love you. Thank you for doing everything you do. Continuing to breathe at the same time. Okay. Following along the body, going down the legs. We're just rubbing. If you want to add any sort of pressure that feels good, listening to your body, maybe a little massage, talking at the same time, but try to breathe in and out as you're doing this. Then with the chest, also a very sensitive area. Of course, we hold a lot of emotions here. So whatever your heart wants, maybe it wants a rub, maybe it just wants to kind of be held. Sometimes I like tapping. That vibration can feel really good. But just bringing that awareness to your heart space. I like a little bit of pressure, again, kind of tapping into that fascial area. And then with the neck, you're just going to kind of move down. Lots of deep breaths as you're doing this. Can you notice what it feels like to even just be in contact with your body? There's so many of us, we forget to do these simple things, to just pay attention to our body. Up to the face, hold your face however you want. Pressing, and kind of tap along the jaw. Up along the eyes. Our forehead holds a lot of tension. Feel the heat from your fingers. Doing the same down the back of your head. If you have someone that you love or trust, ask them to do it to your head. Give you a little head massage. That can be really restorative. And then anything else you need. Maybe your body wants a little shake, a little wiggle. Maybe there's tension in certain spots that are now asking for your attention. Go there, put your hand on it. Anything soothing, gentle, nurturing. Just paying attention to your body, okay? And that's it.
How is everyone feeling? That was awesome. Krista, thank you so much. Those were both like such great exercises.
Yeah, just a little thing I was going to add. I think we like to complicate taking care of ourselves. We like to complicate taking care of our body. We think we need to be dedicating like an hour to meditating, or, oh, I don't have half an hour to do breath work. It can be 5 minutes. 5 minutes, just noticing your body, bringing yourself back, trying to calm. Okay. It doesn't have to be big and complicated and like the things you're seeing on social media all the time.
I agree. I agree. Awesome. Well, thank
Hey.
you,
Yeah.
Ellen, for joining us. I'm trying to see here. You know what? I may just end that. So I was struggling with going back and forth between the screens. So yeah, thank you for coming to Decoding Stress. I did pop in our websites for both of us for like if you wanted to chat further about anything for our 15-minute, but we also do have a freebie for you guys that will be coming as well. So Krista made this beautiful handout for you guys. It's all about the nervous system. And I also have a checklist that you can use to help you kind of self-reflect for the next week or so. So those will be coming as just our thank you to you for attending today.
Yeah. This is
Yeah,
fun.
it
Thanks,
was so
everybody. Hope
fun.
it yeah, was restorative and you're able to learn some things. We are here to answer any questions if people do want to stick around, if they have anything pressing, or you can just send us an email. We are both happy to chat at any time about anything.
Yeah, awesome. Are you still recording? Do you want to maybe stop
Yeah.
the recording and then I will answer. I know Ashley, if Ashley's still here.